Could I ask people to take their seats, please? Yesterday, we marked up 2 appropriation bills, military construction and homeland. Today, we intend to mark up 3 more. And tomorrow, we intend to mark up ag and labor age. In the first week that we get back after the 4th, we expect to mark up, and you should have notices in your office to this effect, we expect to mark up interior, legislative, and THUD. That will mean that after that first week, we will have only 2 bills remaining that have not been reported by subcommittee and full committee, being foreign ops and defense. We expect to spend virtually the remainder of August on the floor with whatever appropriation, yes, I'm sorry, we will be gone in August. But in July, we expect to be using most of the House time for floor time on appropriation bills. So members ought to understand that we're going to have a very heavy workload in July, and I would not count on any Mondays or Fridays at home. Even if the House winds up not being in session, I think the committee will have to be on several of those days. So we might as well face that fact now. Before we get started, where is the gentlewoman from Michigan? She's not here. Well, all righty. I simply wanted to say that I understood that today is her birthday, and I do not know which birthday it is. All I know is she's considerably younger than I am, and if she were here, I would congratulate her. If she doesn't come here, we can congratulate her on the floor.
She's off celebrating her birthday with John Peterson, who's not here.
I could think of better company. All right. Just kidding, just kidding. Okay. Let me simply ask, before we begin with the subcommittee bills, Mr. Luce, do you have any comments?
Mr. Chairman, first, I want to congratulate you for the work that we accomplished yesterday. It was a long day, and we covered a lot of material, but I thought it was handled very well and very professionally. I must say that I am a bit disappointed in your remarks regarding July and our having to be in committee over such an extensive period of time. I mean, the work that the chairman and the ranking member have done on the interior bill is such a fabulous product. They've worked so well together. It seems to me that, assuming Mr. Peterson gets here eventually, we could do that bill tomorrow or even today and help us. Never mind, David. I'm just kidding you. In the old days, you and I used to say together, we're not going to let anybody tell us what to do with our committee.
Well, we're going to have labor H out tomorrow, okay, and ag, and whatever comes after that comes after that.
Okay. The bills under consideration today, I think, reflect the very bipartisan spirit that we have talked about in the committee. I mean, really, these subcommittee members, the chairman and their ranking members, have done a fabulous job of working together, and I believe reflects the best of not just the Appropriations Committee, but the best of the Congress as well. This is a particularly bittersweet day for us because 2 of the people who will be chatting with us today are presenting their respective bills to the full committee for the last time. Dave Hobson and Ralph Regula are not just fabulous members of our committee. All who've worked with them over a period of time respect their work and are very grateful for the service they've been to the committee. So thank you, gentlemen, very much. They weren't applauding. What's going on? Never mind. I have discussed with David Obey and staff members as well our 4th of July break and the schedule for the rest of July. I really do believe that the sooner we get to the interior bill and get that work done, the better off we're going to be. There's no secret in this room that the folks at home are jumping up and down about oil prices, and indeed well over $4 a gallon is impacting each and every one of us. And the sooner we get that work done, the better. And if I were talking to leadership in the House, I would encourage them to have us put it on our agenda tomorrow. But before I close, let me say that I'm very pleased with the fact that Mr. Peterson is going to have an amendment later on today, even if he chose to be celebrating a birthday before that. John, we look forward to working with you as soon as you do arrive. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm through. I'll yield back the balance of my time.
All right. Mr. Mullahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we are here today to consider the subcommittee's recommendation for Commerce, Justice, Science, and Related Agencies Appropriation Act for fiscal year 2009. This spring, in preparation for this occasion, our subcommittee held an extensive series of 20 hearings, 2 informal briefings, featuring testimony from department officials, oversight agencies, members of Congress, and of course, outside witnesses. We focused on every department and the components within them, and we offer both encouragement and criticism where warranted in this bill. Our work can be found in 8 hearing volumes and over 8,000 pages of official transcript. Mr. Chairman, at the outset, let me thank my ranking member, Mr. Freelandheisen. He and his terrific staff have been a part of this bill right from the beginning, been interactive all the way. His fingerprints are all over it, and we very much appreciate the ability to work with him professionally and appreciate his personal friendship. Tremendous contributions to the bill, and we welcomed his input. We've worked cooperative together, and let me thank each member of the subcommittee as well. We had the same relationship with them. And at this point, let me thank a tremendous staff. We all appreciate how hard they work, and I'd like to mention them. John Blasey, Marjorie Dusky, Adrian Simpson, Diana Simonson, Diana Simpson, Scott Samus, and Tracy Laturner, Mike Ringler and John Martins from the minority did a tremendous job, Sally Moorhead, Julie Aronson on my staff, and Katie Hazlett, Mr. Freelandheiser's staff. All these people, as everybody here knows, worked extremely hard together to bring this bill endlessly, tirelessly. Lastly, I want to thank Mr. Obey for his courtesies extended throughout the process to the subcommittee and to me. We want to thank him for his allocation and for contributions to the allocation along the ways as we had additional needs. Provided the subcommittee permits us to invest in critical science research and climate change and aeronautics, as well as state and local law enforcement, all areas in which the budget request was very inadequate. I believe that the product presented to you today reflects the bipartisan majority of the House, and I'm pleased to recommend it to you. It's a balanced bill. Well, this bill, Mr. Chairman, touches and enriches the lives of every American in many varied ways, whether in assisting the poor with legal representation, combating crime and deterring terrorism and the scourge of drugs, improving and protecting our nation's oceans, waters, and natural habitats, enabling new discoveries in science here in our nation's laboratories on Earth or in the heavens that lead to improvements in health, our environment, and our economy, or providing appropriate humane care of our inmate population to reduce recidivism and return men and women to productive lives in society. This bill really covers a broad swath. In brief summary, the bill totals $56.8 billion. That's an increase of $5 billion over fiscal year 2008 enacted and over $3.1 billion over the President's request. And while these figures may suggest that this subcommittee is swimming in cash, I can really assure you it's not. Difficult decisions had to be made and trade-offs were weighed. Holes filled, a lot of them. The President's request was woefully inadequate in a number of critical areas. For example, the President proposed reductions of over $1.6 billion in state and local law enforcement grants. He's done that every year, and on a bipartisan basis, the subcommittee, the committee, and the full House have backfilled those holes. This mismanagement of the decennial census, the costs of which rise seemingly by the day and now require over $3.1 billion this fiscal year alone, are placed further stresses on the subcommittee. The recommendation provides $26 billion for investments in science, technology, and innovation, and that's an increase of $1.7 billion over last year. Significant investments in this area and in science, math, and engineering education are critical if the country is to remain competitive in today's global economy. The subcommittee recommendation provides $6.9 billion for the National Science Foundation, $17.8 billion for NASA. Increases above the request for NASA are spread nearly evenly between science and education and aeronautics. The bill includes $785 million for NIST, which restores proposed cuts to the Manufacturing Enhancement Partnerships and the Technology Innovation Program. And while we were unable to meet the fully authorized levels for all the programs contained in America Competes, I believe we have come a long way in fulfilling its objectives within the funds we had available. As for climate change science, which this administration has reduced, marginalized, and mischaracterized to the American people, the bill provides nearly $1.9 billion, which is an increase of over $200 million over last year's level. Within the funds provided for climate data, the bill provides $74 million for restoring important climate sensors on several satellites, GOES and IMPOS. There's no doubt about the need and importance of satellites, but they are an expensive proposition. And to that end, the bill includes direction to the Office of Science and Technology Policy to develop a plan for commercial purchase of weather, environmental, and space weather data. With respect to law enforcement and other activities of the Department of Justice, the bill provides a total of $25.4 billion. That's an increase of $1.9 billion over last year. Full funding of $7.1 billion is recommended for the FBI, $1.9 billion for DEA, and nearly $1.1 billion for the BATF, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. The committee again rejects the administration's decimation of state and local programs, grant programs for law enforcement, and provides a total of over $3.1 billion. Again, it's an ill-conceived proposal by the administration to cut our state and local law enforcement partners at a time when the economy is fragile, and in addition, regional statistics show disturbing trends in violent crime in many areas, and gang crime in many other areas is a scourge on the communities, and it is no time to cut state and local law enforcement. In addition, the committee recommends $5.7 billion for the Bureau of Prisons, which will help address critical shortfalls in corrections staffing, education, drug treatment. $113 million for the department-wide enhancements and new staffing for Adam Walsh and other child exploitation enforcement activities, and $68 million for methamphetamine enforcement. Lastly, I'd like to highlight the $185 million to begin to deploy interoperable law enforcement radio communications systems, identified by the 9/11 Commission as a critical shortfall in the aftermath of the 2001 terrorist attacks. With respect to the Department of Commerce, a total of $8.7 billion is provided, of which $4.3 billion is slated for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, $180 million above the President's request. And for census, the elephant in the room, the bill includes the original request of $2.6 billion. The administration submitted an amendment for an additional $540 million just the other day, too late for this subcommittee to consider it fully today. The full committee will have to deal with that. In my opinion, the Census Bureau, the Department of Commerce, and the contractor really should be embarrassed at this abysmal management of the decennial contract. Our government has a fiduciary responsibility to conduct an accurate count upon which so many decisions are made affecting congressional apportionment and the distribution of billions of dollars annually. I fear that the Bureau of Census is standing on the precipice of ruin, but it will not be for lack of funds. It will be because of mismanagement. The bill provides $390 million for the Legal Services Corporation and $350 million for the EEOC. And lastly, there are no new controversial or proposed policy provisions in this recommendation. In closing, let me acknowledge the work of the staff again and recommend the bill to the full committee, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Frelinghuysen.
Thank the gentleman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to thank my chairman, Al Mollahan, for his friendship and for the good working relationship we've had. I've enjoyed it very much. And I very much appreciate his rigorous approach that he's brought to our oversight responsibilities and for the fair and even-handed way he's conducted the business of our subcommittee. He has been open and responsive to issues and concerns raised by all of our members. I thank you for your commitment to this committee's tradition of bipartisanship and regular order.
Yes.
And I'd also like to thank our incredible staff, our dedicated committee staff on both sides of the aisle. And in addition to those mentioned, I'd like to thank my Chief of Staff, Nancy Knapp, who assists me. This bill includes increases to priority programs that all members can support. The chairman has done an admirable job of ensuring that adequate funds are provided for critical national priorities, such as the FBI counterterrorism programs, local crime-fighting efforts, and cutting-edge scientific research. However, I believe we could have met the most urgent needs by prioritizing within a lower allocation. The allocation given to this subcommittee was $56.9 billion, which is $5 billion above the current year. That's an increase of 9.8%. The bill is also $3.2 billion over the President's request. With this very generous allocation, virtually every agency and account in the bill is funded at or above the President's request. I, too, would like to briefly outline some of the most important contents of the bill. In the Commerce Department, the bill fully supports the original request for the 2010 decennial census. As the chairman has said, we recently received an amended request for an additional $540 million, which is not addressed in this bill. But we understand that the companion bill reported in the other body does include this funding. I look forward to working with the chairman to address the management problems that he's correctly identified and ultimately provide the necessary funds to ensure a timely and accurate census. I appreciate the chairman for providing increased funding for the U.S. Trade Representative. This funding is critical to support the growth of free and fair trade, a key to our future economic well-being and security. A new administration in January will, I suspect, welcome it too. In the Justice Department, the bill includes increases of over $400 million for the FBI, most notably in critical counterterrorism programs. It includes $3.1 billion for state and local law enforcement accounts, including programs addressing violence against women, gangs, and methamphetamine, as well as an increase in the SCAP program to help localities deal with the growing costs of incarcerating criminal aliens. This bill will make a real impact in the fight against child exploitation. It includes, and this comes in view of some of the remarks and discussion yesterday, it includes $63 million for missing and exploited children's programs, $10 million for sex offender management assistance, and increases of $16 million for federal law enforcement agencies to combat child exploitation using the Internet and to apprehend unregistered sex offenders. I'm also very pleased that the bill includes increased funding for the DEA's mobile enforcement teams to help local law enforcement deal with the most acute cases of drug-related crime and violence, and we heard from many members on that issue. In addition, I'd like to acknowledge the chairman for championing necessary increase for the Bureau of Prisons, both in the supplemental and in this bill. We must provide the funds to operate a safe and secure federal prison system. The killing of a correctional officer over the weekend in a federal penitentiary in California is a terrible reminder of the difficult and dangerous work that prison employees face every day. I know our thoughts and prayers are with that person's family. This bill funds NASA at $17.8 billion, which is $155 million above the request. This level will keep NASA on track with the development of Orion and Ares exploration systems while advancing increases for space, science, and aeronautics research. The bill also funds the requested amount for the National Science Foundation, an increase of 13%, and we heard from a lot of members on the NSF. While overall funding for NSF and NIST are very healthy, I would have preferred more funding within those agencies allocated to the core basic scientific research that fosters innovation, the engine of our economy. The NSF and NIST core research accounts are $80 million below the requested level. In conclusion, I'd like again to express my appreciation to Chairman Mollahan and Chairman Obey for their openness and consideration. I'm grateful for their cooperative approach, and I look forward to working together as the process continues. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
A few months ago, I played Happy Birthday on my harmonica for Betty McCollum. It is not true that I was asked by Carolyn Kilpatrick not to play my harmonica today. I just left it at home. But we just wanted to wish you a happy birthday. Mr. Lewis, any comments? No comments. All right, Mr. Mollahan, you have an amendment?
Yes.
The clerk will report the amendment.
An amendment offered by Mr. Mollahan on page 12 of the bill, line 12, strike $89,640,000 and insert $122 million. On page 15 of the bill, line 17.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that the amendment be considered read.
Without objection.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Frelinghuysen, first of all, before I go to this amendment, I would like to first thank Mr. Frelinghuysen for his kind remarks and also comment on the death in the Bureau of Prisons. Prison guard was brutally killed in a California prison by attack of 2 inmates. Whether it turns out that this has anything to do with short staffing or not, we'll just have to see. But we have recognized in this bill that the Bureau of Prisons has been woefully underfunded for staffing. These staff members are working overtime 2-3 times a week. And obviously they're under very trying circumstances, and I just want the members to know that before this incident we have seriously addressed this with a $545 million increase over fiscal year 2008 enacted level for prison operations, and $160 million of that is provided over the request to address the critical staffing and programmatic shortfalls. So we are addressing in this bill that problem. Now to the amendment, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk, and thank you for considering it as read. The amendment has been cleared with a minority and addresses several issues. First, the amendment funds the Manufacturing Extension Partnerships Program at the full authorized level. And Mr. Nolenberg, we'd like to appreciate your support in that, and I understand you have a thought on that in a moment. But we've done that by reducing the amounts for NOAA's procurement, acquisition, and construction account programs support construction activity. The bill would then provide, even after we do that, $37,890,000 for NOAA procurement, acquisition, and construction. And that's an increase of $14,962,000 over fiscal year 2008. So we felt that that was a place that we could take it and hopefully restore some money in conference. But in any event, it's a sizable increase with the cut over last year. And secondly, the amendment addresses a classified matter that was presented to us by NASA after we reported the bill from subcommittee. And lastly, the amendment makes modest adjustments in a few of the state and local law enforcement grant tables to reflect items that many of our colleagues, some of them sitting here, have asked us to address. The amendment does not change the budgetary totals of the bill, but reallocates funds from certain activities within the Science Directorate and cross-agency support program accounts. And, Mr. Chairman, I ask for its immediate adoption.
Mr. Frelinghuysen.
Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased to support the amendment and also acknowledge the strong advocacy of Congressman Nolenberg on the MEP program. Thank you.
If there are no other comments, those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment's adopted. I have an amendment. Oh,
Mr.
I'm
Nolan.
sorry. Chairman.
Is this on or off?
The light's on.
What is the item on? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And
Doesn't sound like it's on.
maybe it doesn't like it. Is that better? Yeah. Why is it better? I don't know. But I wanted to thank, Mr. Chairman, first of all, you for recognizing me. But Mr. Mollahan, thank you very, very much for bringing this into the picture. And Mr. Frelinghuysen, it took some work, I know. I just wanted to take a couple of moments to indicate some things that are important about this, the MEP. Many of you know, most of you, I think, do know. But one thing is, you probably remember, I was going to offer an amendment, but obviously the decision by the chairman and the committee and the ranking member was all it took. I just want to make sure that this is a bipartisan program, and it's there's some 350 sites around the country that exist that provide the support for the various small businesses that rank in this country, as in your district, in my district, and around the country. I want to make sure that that everybody seems to know this is for small business. Small business is the backbone of this country. It's the backbone of the economy. And I know some people who are running for president would like to double it. I'm not going there, but that's something that shows a little bit about the support that is within the community. One thing, too, there was over 200 members of Congress that wrote on behalf of this issue. 22 governors, I believe it was, also wrote to defend this program. And MEP does one heck of a job. One thing I would tell you about, in my district, I have a number of small businesses that are manufacturing businesses, but they are all over the country, too. One thing I will tell you, this particular firm that I happened to pick up a flyer that they received in the mail. They were failing. They had about 40 employees. They made doors. These doors are special kinds of doors, but they were losing money, and they were afraid they'd have to, like, this is a three-generation company. 3 generations of producing these doors. Well, now they found the way. In fact, the MEP came in, installed a number of new technologies that took the place of what they had. And here's some of just a rundown of the things that it does. It improves assembly line production, reduces inventory, saves jobs, increases productivity, increases profit, cuts costs, same thing, I guess, but and also the introduction of the new technology in many cases allows this particular company. They're exporting doors to Europe, to Israel, to around the world. They thought they were going to die, but they decided to get some help. They got it. And another company in my district that has about 250 employees literally saved themselves, too, by calling in MEP. They do a great job, and I think they deserve a huge amount of credit. And I was just going to say, too, in closing, that in 2007 alone, by the way, that business saved $400,000 just by taking the advice of the MEP. But in 2007 alone, MEP helped to create and retain some 2,000 jobs, generate almost $7 billion in sales, stimulate more than $1.65 billion in economic growth. And I just think those are some of the things that really turn this thing around, it is a workable, a very efficient organization. And I just wanted to thank again.
Well, gentlemen, you,
glad to.
not to make an extended comment on an amendment that's already been adopted, but he notes the bipartisan aspect of this, and it certainly is appreciated, and it very much is. The Speaker of the House of Representatives was very interested in this provision, as were many members on both sides of the aisle. The only lack of bipartisanship was from the administration that requested $4 million to shut the program down, but The gentleman comes from an area that particularly appreciates the effectiveness of this program, as do I, and so I appreciate his advocacy for it personally.
And I would just add,
Thank
too,
you.
that this is a bipartisan agreement here, and I can sense it just by talking to everybody here. And I, again, want to suggest that, yes, the administration did kind of get cold feet. The big thing is that we as a group came together and produced something that I think is a very good product. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I have an amendment at the desk, which I would ask the clerk to read.
An amendment offered by Mr. Obie. At an appropriate place in the committee print, insert the following and make such technical and conforming changes as may be appropriate. Section: The Attorney General and the head of any entity in the Department of Justice in making grants in the exercise of authority under any discretionary grant program shall, 1, conduct a peer review process, and 2, adhere strictly to the peer review rankings made.
This amendment is here for a variety of reasons. The first reason is that, as you know, the executive branch and quite a few others seem to have enjoyed kicking Congress around as an institution recently on the issue of earmarks. Now, there are certainly examples where the Congress has not covered itself with glory with respect to earmarks. But I would point out that the lion's share by far of the stories that appeared about abuse of the earmarking process featured actions taken not by this committee, but by other committees or other entities. Example, in the most visible case, the Cunningham case. In the main, with I believe one or two exceptions, in the main, what Mr. Cunningham evidently did was to simply plus up funding for programs that were already being funded. And then instead of getting visible earmarks for them, he evidently simply picked up the phone, called the administrators, and browbeat them into funding his programs. That's the old-fashioned way that it used to happen before earmarking became such a regular occurrence on the Hill. The famous bridge to nowhere had nothing to do with an appropriations committee action. And yet, if you talk to people today, it seems to have been absorbed into the cultural lore that somehow the appropriations earmarking process was involved in that. It was not. So what I am doing today is simply responding to what appears to be a serious problem in the Department of Justice with respect to their earmarking process, or to put it in different terminology, what we're talking about in both the case of the Congress and in the case of the administration is what I would call directed spending. And there have been a number of instances which I think require us to take this action today. ABC News carried a story just recently which said a former top official in the White House faith-based office was awarded a lucrative Department of Justice grant under pressure from two senior administration appointees, according to current and former DOJ staff members in a review of internal DOJ documents and emails. The grant was awarded over the strong objection of career DOJ staff who did not believe that, I'm not going to name the group because I don't like to attack groups or people if they're not in the room to defend themselves. But the grant was awarded over the strong objections of career DOJ staff who did not believe that X program was qualified for the grant and that too great an amount of the funds was going to that consulting company instead of being spent on services for children. We have another article in the Washington Post. Justice Department grant overseer subject of criminal probe. We have another article in Youth Today, which states, for juvenile justice, a panel of one new grants skip top scoring bids. And if you go on and look at some of the other stories that abound, they list 12 sole source, no bid grants that were provided by the agency. And then this morning, we have another story in the newspaper entitled "A Scathing Report, Ideology-Based Hiring at Justice Broke Laws, Investigation Finds." Now, I don't want to prejudge any of these, but I do want to take note that the executive branch has had a lot of fun lately trying to make the Congress look bad with respect to the issue of directed spending. And I think, as we understand, human nature is such that any time that anyone has the ability to move money around, there are going to be a few knaves or fools who spoil the process for the entire institution. So all this amendment does is to require the Justice Department to establish a peer review system for reviewing these grants and contracts, and then to adhere to whatever peer review system they set up. Now, if the agency thinks that that's too strict or stringent, they've got a lot of time between now and the time this bill becomes law to come down and visit with us and talk to us if they think that there would be a more workable approach. But I do think that we have an obligation as an institution to pay the same amount of attention to so-called malpractice, if it occurs in the agencies, as we do when malpractice occurs in our own ranks. And so I would urge adoption of the amendment. Mr. Frelinghuysen.
Mr. Chairman, pleased to support the amendment. I think anything we could do to promote peer review, merit-based decisions. Obviously, if there's criminality involved, those people need to be prosecuted. But this would have an effect, obviously, on the present Justice Department, assuming this is passed before the end of the year, and obviously would have an effect on future administration. So I commend you for your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further comment, those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment's adopted. Mr. Culbertson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have only one amendment I want to bring to the committee's attention and withdraw it, but bring it to your attention because of its extraordinary importance. We, as members of this committee, I think.
Would the gentleman tell us?
I'm sorry, I
what amendment
apologize.
he's talking about?
I have the amendment that is dealing with the U.S. Attorney in the District of Arizona, and it's the one dealing with travel. And Mr. Chairman, I couldn't agree.
Could I ask the clerk to read the amendment before you discuss it?
Number 3.
If I may dispense with the reading.
An amendment offered by Mr. Culbertson.
I would rather, since this is a serious matter, with all due respect, I would rather this amendment be read.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
An amendment offered by Mr. Culbertson. Page 28, line 6, insert the following before the period at the end. Provided further that none of the funds made available under this act for the U.S. Attorney for the District of Arizona may be used for travel outside the state of Arizona or for any non-official purpose until the Attorney General determines that the number of prosecutions in such district in fiscal year 2009 for violations of the laws prohibiting human and drug smuggling and violations of Section 275 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, 8 U.S.C. 1325, which prohibits illegal entry into the United States, increases to 25% of the number of prosecutions of all cases referred by the Border Patrol to the U.S. Attorney in such fiscal year.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I bring this to your attention, and I'm going to withdraw the amendment because my chairman, my ranking member have been, true models of doing what's right for the country without regard to party. Both of them have been gentlemen. We've worked very well together, and I'm all for this amendment as an example of trying to deal with a really serious problem. That is, how do we, as members of Congress, get the executive branch to respond and frankly do their job in a way that when we appropriate this money, we expect these agencies to do their job in a way that complies with the law. And Mr. Chairman, you're actually right about the administration earmarking money, about earmarking being abused. A yardstick for the Congress should be a yardstick for the administration. And this amendment would attempt, and again I'm going to withdraw it, to restrict the travel funding used by the U.S. Attorney in the in the District of Arizona in the U.S. Attorney's Office, because she will not enforce the law. And I'm frankly at my wit's end. We have in our subcommittee appropriated a tremendous amount of money to the Department of Justice for the U.S. attorneys to increase their hiring, to enforce the law within the United States and along the border. We sent 40 additional U.S. attorneys to the to the southwest border. 21 of those U.S. attorneys, Mr. Chairman, went to the Arizona district because they have over half of the illegal crossings, yet the U.S. attorney there will not use those new U.S. attorneys to prosecute drug smugglers or human smugglers. She is ignoring the oath that she took. Mr. Chairman, Chairman Obey brings this article to our attention today that ideological-based hiring at the Department of Justice broke the law. I'd suggest perhaps rather than this amendment, Mr. Chairman, that our subcommittee, I'd like us to do a full-blown, I'd like to look at the way our U.S. attorneys along the southwest border are doing their job. I'd like to know how many, and for example, my good friend Cyril Rodriguez, if you go to the Del Rio sector, the U.S. attorney there, the U.S. attorney in the Southern District of Houston and the Laredo area, they are, with the full support and cooperation of the people of Laredo and Del Rio, arresting and prosecuting everyone who crosses the border. The result has been a dramatic drop in the crime rate, tremendous support among the local community. Ciro and Henry Cuellar and I are working arm in arm on this. It's good for the country. Yet in Arizona, now this is dumbfounding. Listen to this, you only believe this. If you cross the border in Arizona carrying less than a quarter ton of dope, you will not go to jail. She won't prosecute you. You have a 99.6% chance of never going to jail and being home in time for dinner if you're arrested by the Border Patrol in Arizona. Now, I've been working on this since February and trying to find a way to get this resolved, but she will not respond. And if any of you doubt that slavery exists, go to the southern border. If you doubt that piracy exists, go to the border. Judge Carter just brought to my attention that they're actually, now these killers and pirates are actually kidnapping people, calling their families on the phone and torturing them until the families send them extra money. It's an outrage, and this U.S. attorney, her name is Diane Humtaway. I've been working closely with Gabriella Giffords, and she's been wonderful. This is a bipartisan effort, Mr. Chairman. But I bring this amendment to your attention, members, because it's difficult as appropriators. How do we make these agencies do their job? And I filed this amendment to cut her travel completely off in the state of Arizona until she at least gets her prosecution rate up to 25%. It's an important question that we in this committee need to make sure that we deal with as subcommittee, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to withdraw the amendment, but ask Mr. Chairman if we could work together with Ranking Member Frelinghuysen in focusing our attention on the U.S. attorneys' offices along the southwest border, Mr. Chairman, and maybe get out and do some fact-finding. I'd like our subcommittee to really turn a searchlight on Arizona in particular and find out why they won't do their job, because the Border Patrol agents are at their wits' end. I can tell you, Mr. Chairman, in conclusion, the Marshal Service in Arizona is on board. The judges are on board. The Border Patrol is on board. They found the bed space. The Congressman Giffords is on board. Everybody is ready for the law to be enforced in Arizona, but the U.S. Attorney, and it's an absolute puzzle why she won't. And I thank you for your support and help in the bill. And maybe we can find a way to shine the light of truth on what's going on in Arizona and make that U.S. Attorney there do her job. And I withdraw the amendment.
Let me respond first. Mr. Chairman, first of all, I appreciate the gentleman's concern, and I know he has an interest and a real concern on the southwest border enforcement of all kinds. Certainly, the committee, and I know Mr. Frelinghuysen and I both look forward to working with you as we have in the past on all of these issues. And it's that partially, and significant partially, in support of the gentleman's interest that some of this enhanced funding that I'm going to mention is in the bill. In 2008, we increased a southwest border enforcement over previous years by $40 million, $7 million of it for U.S. attorneys. In this bill, there is $88 million for Southwest Border Initiative, $8 million for U.S. attorneys. And perhaps it's an issue of allowing the statistics to catch up with the money or the initiative. And hopefully the gentleman is talking about a condition that predates this enhanced funding. I hope that's true, and I hope that there are real efforts in the Justice Department to use the funding that we put in 08 and 09. If I could just finish 08 and 09 for this purpose. At the same time, I do want to suggest to the full committee that, in fairness to the Justice Department, they do contest some of the gentleman's assertions, and they indicate that this border section has experienced almost half of the immigration apprehensions, and combined the 5 Southwest border U.S. Attorney offices, and they prosecuted 38% of the narcotics cases in the whole federal system out of that section. So the gentleman's going to withdraw the amendment, so don't want to get into a real detailed of it. I know the gentleman from Arizona would like to speak to it, and he, of course, is most knowledgeable about it, but there is a difference in performance here, the gentleman's view versus the Justice Department.
Yeah, I will withdraw the amendment, but this sector needs our attention.
Mr. Pastor.
Gentleman yield. I thank the chairman for yielding. One of the things I learned in law school, probably the only thing I learned in law school, is reasonable men will differ, or reasonable people will differ. I don't know about the reasonality of this argument, but I'll go ahead and try to make it. The young lady that my colleague is referring to is the first Native American U.S. attorney that was supported by Senator Kyle, who's an advocate of enforcing the law in the Southwest, and by Senator McCain. That's who nominated this young lady. She has a distinguished track record with the U.S. attorneys. The former U.S. attorney was one of the 7 that was asked to be removed and was removed by the Justice Department, Paul Charlton. The problem that we've had, and as my colleague from Texas points out, Arizona is ground zero. But to say that she's not willing to prosecute is absurd. It's stupid. She took an oath, and she's willing to uphold it. And she is. One of the problems, and you recognize it, Mr. Chairman, is that we're at ground zero. And you have to have priorities. The local county attorneys, as well as this U.S. attorney, knows she can't prosecute everybody. Yesterday, I had a colleague that wanted to increase the number of 287Gs. That means more enforcement. We need, and what the amendment ought to do, and what he ought to recommend, is that the $8 million that you're increasing go to the southern sector of Arizona, so we can have more judges, more courthouses, more prosecutors. But to say that she's not prosecuting is absurd. She's prosecuting to the best of her ability. But every time you arrest somebody for a tail light violation as well as carrying drugs, that means time in the court, more judges, etc. We don't have them. Why don't you support and make an amendment today to take that additional $8 million and put it in Arizona? And then we can evaluate. What you ought to do is worry about your district and leave other districts alone. Why don't you, you know, this is ridiculous.
In Texas, we're doing it right.
He doesn't have time, Mr. Chairman, but can I yield to him?
Sure.
All right, I'll yield to you.
And I'll be brief. Texas is truly doing this right, and I've worked behind the scenes quietly since February. My friend Cyril...
Well, how do you evaluate doing it right? You tell me how you evaluate doing it right. It's all relevant.
In Texas, very briefly, let me tell you, if you're arrested by the Border Patrol in Del Rio or Laredo, you will be prosecuted. If you are arrested by the...
By who? By the U.S. attorney or by local attorneys?
Very quickly, if you're arrested by the Border Patrol in Texas, you will be prosecuted. If you're arrested by the Border Patrol in Arizona, you have a 99.6% chance you're going to be cut loose. And I'll show you the doc. I'll prove it to you.
I'll be happy to accept them, Mr. Chairman, and with that, I'll yield back on this argument.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I look forward to working with you to find a way to make sure the laws enforced.
Chicken shit, I support the administration.
The amendment's withdrawn.
We do that. I just want to take a moment to recognize that Dixon Butler is back with us. He As you know, he had some serious surgery. Tanya Berquam will continue to act as clerk as Dixon's rehabilitation continues. But I think we're all glad to see Dixon back and moving around. I expect he'll be running sprints sometime very soon. And now, Mr. Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at this.
Clerk will read.
An amendment offered by Mr. Simpson.
Further reading of the amendment. Mr. Chairman, this is a non-controversial amendment, but I think to the report language, I think it's agreed to by both the ranking member and the chairman. It deals with the Bureau of Prisons having a 20% vacancy rate in the number of dentists. There are a number of federal prisons, 13 of them that have no dentists. We're required to provide dental care to these and medical care to these inmates. All this does is ask the Bureau of Prisons by the end of this year to file a report on what they plan to do to address the vacancy rate in the prison system and how they're going to address that issue. So just report language, and I think it's been agreed to.
Mr. Chairman, we do agree and accept the amendment.
Those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Has the amendment been distributed?
I believe so. Yes, I believe so, Mr. Chairman. I know I look different today, but it has been distributed.
Clerk will read the amendment.
An amendment offered by Ms. Wasserman Schultz at the appropriate place in the committee report under the heading.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to congratulate Chairman Freudian slip, Mohan and Mr. Farlingham on a very well-crafted bill.
Can you use the microphone?
I'll congratulate them on the night and tell them that I think they've done
I don't think it's
an
on.
excellent job. Is that better? Again, I don't know how it's better, but okay. I'll take your word for it. Anyway, Mr. Chairman and members, according to the FBI's uniform crime reports, a motor vehicle is stolen in the United States every 26.4 seconds. Thousands of our constituents are victims of motor vehicle crimes every year. The National Motor Vehicle Title Information System, previously authorized by the Anti-Car Theft Act of 1992, is a critically important program that assists law enforcement in deterring motor vehicle theft, vehicle fraud, and terrorism. My amendment, which has been cleared by the chairman and the ranking members, at least that's my understanding, would add report language to the Department of Justice title of this bill that would recognize the importance of funding the NMVIDIS program. The language would also direct DOJ to report within 60 days of enactment of this bill on the status of this program and its recommendations to achieve full implementation. The committee has previously recognized the importance of funding the NMVIDIS in the report, and I would ask that we continue that commitment for this important law enforcement tool.
We accept the amendment, Mr.
Balance of
Chairman.
my time.
The amendment's accepted. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment's adopted. Mr. Kirk.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the report.
An amendment offered.
will read.
An amendment offered by Mr. Kirk.
Without objection.
Mr. Chairman, this amendment to the report includes the guts of what was called the Gang Elimination Act that passed the House of Representatives overwhelmingly. What it does is it requires the Attorney General and the Secretary for Homeland Security to issue a report within 1 year on the 3 top international drug gangs operating in the United States that represent the greatest threat to public order and the security of the United States. I'm particularly concerned, as my colleague from Virginia is, about the operations of a gang, for example, called Madre Salva Tercer, MS-13, which has been one of the most violent gangs in the United States. Or, for example, the Gangster Disciple Nation in my own state of Illinois, now numbering over 18,000 people. If we totaled up all of the formalized registered gang members in the United States, it would equal the 5th largest army on earth. I think this is beginning to be a homeland security issue for the United States, and taking down these gangs, now who are in a death struggle with the elected government of Mexico just south of the border, should be a national priority, and this report will help. I yield to Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, we accept the amendment.
Pleased to support it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The amendment's accepted. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment's adopted. Any further amendments? If not, the chair will entertain a motion.
Chairman, I move that the bill as amended be favorably reported to the House.
Questions on the motion, report the bill. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. I ask unanimous consent the staff be permitted to make technical and conforming changes to the bill and the report just approved. 3.5.
We need a second to transition the staff out.
If I could ask those who are leaving to do so as quietly as possible so we can turn to the second bill. File.
Congratulations, Chairman. Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Rob. Yeah.
Sorry about John.
Great job. No, it's okay. I mean, John's just,
You know better.
he gets excited. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, last 2 years. God bless
Good job. You're a good man.
Couldn't do it without him. Seriously.
Glad to be able to help. You're a pro.
And a good friend. I appreciate it.
I cannot find those energy sheets that I gave you. Thank you. You would think I would not lose every damn thing that comes within my reach.
Mr. Visclosky, you're all set?
One more second, I will be, yes, sir.
Let me have that other book.
Whenever you want to go.
Not
Anytime, Mr. Neighbors. Rob.
Here, I found mine, Rob.
It's you. Just go.
I found mine.
Yeah.
Could I ask people to take a seat or leave the room? Mr. Visklowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the Energy and Water Development Subcommittee approved this bill unanimously on June 17th in order to report it to the committee. This bill provides funding for the diverse activities of the Department of Energy, along with investments in the water infrastructure of the United States through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the Bureau of Reclamation. Before I get into the substance of the bill, there are a couple of observations that I would make. As we began our work, we were in a hole, so to speak, because the administration, from my perspective, underfunded water in the United States of America to the tune of about $1.1 billion. They also underfunded renewables and weatherization by about $493 million. And as everyone in this room understands, we have a very serious energy problem that we confront and also need additional resources. So on behalf of all of the members of the subcommittee, I do want to thank Chairman Obey for recognizing that particular responsibility and making sure that we did have full room to maneuver as far as meeting our responsibilities, and particularly those new initiatives. The failures are ours, not his. As everyone on the committee also understands, the work of all of us is strongly supported by the exceptional staff of the Appropriations Committee, and do want to individually thank each member of our staff. Uday Veradarajan is with us, and it is my understanding that later this year he will go to the dark side, and that is the Office of Management and Budget. But don't hold that against him. You can boo him. You can boo him. But he's a good person. He's a good person. Terry Tyborowski has also done an exceptional job, and new to the staff this year, Robert Sherman. We also have Lauren Minto, Lori Mays. We also have Colonel Kenny Kraft, who is a colonel in the Army National Guard and has done an exceptional job over the years. Sherry Davenport, Kevin Cook. Mr. Obey has already recognized the good work and the return of Dixon Butler. We also have Rob Blair and Tanya Berkwam, our clerk. Finally, and Mr. Lewis has already noted the situation, this will be the last full committee markup for my ranking member, my former chairman, my good friend, and my partner. And would want to go on for a couple of minutes about Mr. Hobson and his service to his constituents, his service to our country and the world, and for his leadership for all of us on this committee. Primarily, Mr. Hobson believes in good policy over political expediency. And during my tenure on the subcommittee, we have always tended to be, prior to his arrival in chairmanship, the Water Subcommittee, supplementing to a large degree our energy responsibilities to the other body in conference. That completely changed 5 years ago under Mr. Hobson's chairmanship. While the gentleman from Ohio led the fight for financial and project management reform within the Army Corps of Engineers, to maximize its efficiency and expend taxpayers' dollars more wisely, I am most struck that he also made the committee relevant and a leader in energy policy. 5 years ago, under his chairmanship, instead of following past practice and generally ceding to the other body for additional water resources, Mr. Hobson engaged all of us in a conference that resulted in a wiser, more balanced energy policy, one that led to greater benefits for all of the American people. Our bill in fiscal year 2004 was a far better product and moved energy policy forward in a positive direction because David Hobson chaired this subcommittee. And in each year subsequently, we have built on the foundation he has laid and gone from being the Water Development Subcommittee to the Energy and Water Development Subcommittee. But the final two observations I would make are very personal because we have become very fast friends. I have always thought one of the great professions in the world is to be a teacher. Because if you can teach someone a portion of knowledge that they can use for the rest of their life, you have given that person a precious gift. Dave Hobson taught me how to be a good chairman. The failures are my own, but he has been a masterful teacher. And secondly, the highest compliment I can give another gentleman is that if something happened to me tomorrow morning, and many of you know my two sons, John and Tim, Mr. Pastore still calls them Batman and Robin, even though they're 21 and 18 now. But I knew that they would be left in Mr. Hobson's charge. I would leave this world a very happy man myself, because I know they would be instilled with good moral values. They would be imbued with a sense of service, and they would have a wise counselor for the rest of their lives. And I would ask that you give our friend and our leader, Mr. Hobson, a round of applause.
Before we continue, I simply want to add a word about Dave Hobson. We are all politicians, and at the same time, we're all legislators. Anybody who knows Dave Hobson knows that he's a good politician, but anybody who knows him also knows that legislating comes first with him. And I've seen him many times dig into issues regardless of partisan consequence, and do what he thought was right for this Congress and this institution, and I don't think there's any higher compliment you can pay anyone. In fact, when you look at the way he deals with his job, I'm reminded of the way things used to be in this institution. When, for instance, Tip O'Neill and Bob Michael could take a 30-day trip together all throughout Africa, even though they were the leaders of the opposite parties. Dave Hobson is a superb legislator. He's a terrific human being. He has been a fabulous asset to this committee, and I truly do hate to see him leave. I know we all do, and I want to thank him for his service, not just to his district and the country, but his service to this committee as well.
Well, thank you, Mr. Obey. I guess I'd be better off just to sit down and shut up right now, where I'm ahead at this point. But the politician in me says, no way. You know, give a microphone to a politician, you're in trouble. I do want to thank everyone for their kind comments. We did try in both committees that I chaired here to teach members and others about the process and about what we're about as a committee. And I hope when I leave here that that will continue, and I know it will in both committees. Chet is doing a wonderful job in that committee and carrying on the traditions that we did there. And Pete is certainly carrying on here extremely well. I learned from an old politician in Ohio. He said, when you're in the majority, you treat somebody in the minority the way you would want to be treated if you're in the minority. And I think that's something that we didn't learn well when we were in the majority. And I hope that people, certainly on this committee, I think it's true that we do that well. I just wish in the Congress we did that better overall, that we would learn that. That's a little hard for us all. But I want to thank Pete for an excellent bill. It's a thoughtful approach to some major water resources and energy issues facing this country. And it isn't going to bring down gas prices overnight, but the reality is that the Department of Energy is primarily a research agency, and the investments that we fund in this bill on energy alternatives will not yield overnight results. As I said last week in the subcommittee markup, we didn't get to this energy situation overnight, and we're going to take some work to get our way out of it. As important as the substance of this bill is the process that the majority used to develop it. And I have no complaints. We were all treated very fairly in this, and I'm pleased to be a part of this subcommittee that we have from a number of years now tried to work together and have worked together on both sides of the aisle to get our work done. I want to thank the staff, again, on both sides, as well as in my office and the chairman's, for their dedication and work. And I think one of the most exciting things to me is watch a person who came in as a detailee from the Corps of Engineers, and because of a health care problem, and we're happy to see Dixon Butler back, but because of a problem he had, she stepped up and she became the clerk, and that's Tanya Bergman. And I think Tanya really should be given a hand of applause, because this, taking that responsibility on is not easy. And Pete ran through all the people on there. I'm not going through all those names again, but they've all been wonderful. I do have to do two people at the moment as we look through this. I'm not going to do, I can't say Uday's last name like you did, Pete, and Lauren, but Kenny Kraft has been with me from the beginning. You know he's the consummate appropriators staffer. And Kevin Cook, the best thing Jim Dyer did for me was give me Kevin Cook as the clerk. And I'm glad almost you guys didn't keep him, because I needed him to do the work. But in that, he has worked together with the staff, and we've never had staff going back and forth at each other, trying to one-up each other. And I think that's a tribute to the committee as a whole, because committees run and result of how the leadership is. I'm pleased that the subcommittee continues its support for nuclear power with full funding for Yucca Mountain, the requested extension of the authority for nuclear loan guarantees, and a significant increase in research for the next generation nuclear plant. Despite our mutual frustrations with how the department has bungled the GNEP initiative, we're doing the right thing by maintaining a modest research program on spent fuel recycling under the Advanced Fuel Cycle Initiative. We have to hedge our bets on a variety of energy sources, but nuclear power will certainly come into play a major role in our energy portfolio for the foreseeable future. It's going to be part of the play. This bill also provides $500 million in financial assistance, primarily through grants, to help communities and industries adopt new energy-efficient technologies. I understand that the policy behind the block grant program and these other forms of financial assistance, but we should not have to pay people to adopt energy-saving technologies when there's already plenty of economic incentive to do so. And I'm not enthused about giving $500 million of new spending to the Department of Energy to administer. As I said in full committee markup of this bill, increased spending at DOE is no guarantee of increased results, and that's still true. Lastly, I want to take a moment to talk about catastrophic flooding in the Midwest. I want to thank Mr. Obey for including significant funding in the supplemental to address this problem. And I give you credit for getting the right answer right away on this. But the money we provide the Corps raises some larger questions about the wisdom of how we do flood control in this country. I would have thought that the tragic experience of the Gulf Coast hurricane several years ago would have taught us about the dangers of over-reliance on levees. And here we are again in 2008, learning that levees are not a complete solution to flooding. Any levee, no matter how well it is built and maintained, can be overtopped. The very existence of these levees can promote a false sense of security and can encourage additional development behind the levees, both of which can worsen the situation when the levee eventually overtops. It's not if they overtop, the question is when. For all the money this committee and this Congress spends every year on flood control and emergency flood response, it's time that we look for more comprehensive and effective solutions to flood control. That may include non-structural measures in the floodplain. It may include upstream storage, where the topography allows that, and it most certainly must include more stringent zoning of development in the floodplain. We cannot continue to spend billions of dollars every year on Band-Aid solutions. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, I believe that my good friend and colleague, Mr. Vysotsky, Pete, has produced a balanced and responsible energy and water bill for 2009, and I intend to fully support this bill. I also would like to say that to Bill Young, Jerry Lewis, Mr. Obie, thank you for allowing me to be in these positions over these years. And frankly, nobody really tried to control me too badly, and they didn't, and they knew it wouldn't work. But there's one last person I have to thank, and he's sitting right here next to me. 16 years ago, he came to me and said, would you like to be on the Appropriations Committee? I think I might be able to get you on. And I paused about 2 seconds and said, certainly. And that was Ralph Regula. And it's not very often that people share like that, but Ralph was already on the committee. He was on the Committee on Committees, and he was willing to step forward for me, another Ohioan, to be on this committee. And I will always be thankful to him for the opportunity that he gave me to be on this committee and to work with all of you. It has been a pleasure to work with all of you, and I wish you only the best in the future. Thank you.
To make a number of observations about the bill and then entertain amendments, obviously. Before I begin again addressing the substance of the bill, I would want to again emphasize a concern that the subcommittee has relative to the Department of Energy, and that is their very abysmal project management. Poor project management negatively affects every facet of the Department of Energy's endeavors, and it is the committee's #1 organizational concern at the department. DOE spends 90% of its annual budget on contracts, more than any other government agency, to operate laboratories, production facilities, and environmental restoration sites. Since 1990, 18 years ago, the Government Accountability Office has made an annual assessment of programs that are at the high risk for fraud, waste, abuse, and mismanagement, and every year DOE has made the high-risk list. In the fiscal year 2008 bill, the committee directed DOE to work with GAO to develop a concrete plan to get off the high-risk list, and we have seen little, if any, progress. This year, we renew that directive. On the bill itself, when I go home to Indiana, the first thing everyone asks me is, what are you doing to bring down the price of a gallon of gasoline? The problem of rising prices for gas is both urgent and multifaceted, so the solutions must be as well. There is no silver bullet, and this committee cannot change the price of gas tomorrow. But we can take action today to mitigate the economic consequences of high gas prices while we protect our environment and improve our national security. We can invest and invent our way out of this energy and gas price crisis, and the subcommittee bill seeks to do precisely that. To help squeeze more miles per gallon from our vehicles, the bill provides $305 million in funding for vehicle technology research that develops breakthroughs to reduce petroleum use by automobiles and trucks of all sizes. To strengthen our national security, the bill provides $250 million in research for biofuels and other alternative energy sources to diversify our fuel supply and reduce our dependency on foreign sources of oil. And to make further progress on energy matters and to help protect our environment, the bill provides over $500 million in new programs that support local communities in deploying energy-efficient technologies, help local filling stations install biofuel pumps, and assist automakers in retooling their facilities to manufacture cars that can displace gasoline and reduce carbon emissions. It also makes key investments in clean fossil energy research and demonstrates and continues investments to deploy the next generation of nuclear. Ultimately, we must move away from a carbon-based economy to reverse the trend of global warming, and to do so, we must deploy new technologies as quickly as possible. In the area of science, the bill recommends over $4.8 billion for science, an increase of $844 million over the fiscal year 2008 enacted level for research critical to addressing our long-term energy needs. The committee endorses the proposed Energy Frontier Centers and begins an initial investment into ARPA-E. Relative to nuclear threats, the administration's request is long on weapons and short on non-proliferation. Compared to the previous year, the weapons request is up 5%, while the non-proliferation request is down 6%. The Energy and Water Development Bill levels out this disparity by reducing weapons activities from the requested level and increasing nuclear non-proliferation. The committee again refuses to fund the administration's proposal for a new nuclear weapon, the Reliable Replacement Warhead. And finally, on water, Mr. Hobson has also talked about that. The budget request for water infrastructure was badly deficit with nearly $1 billion in cuts from the fiscal year 2008 enacted level. In order to meet America's needs, the committee recommends an increase of $592 million above the President's request for the Army Corps of Engineers, and an increase of $109 million above the President's request for the Bureau of Reclamation. Chairman, this bill is a product of months of hard work. It is a good bill and certainly would recommend it to my colleagues.
Mr. Lewis?
Mr. Chairman, just congratulations to the chairman and the ranking member for a fabulous job.
All right. Any amendments?
Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Mr. Wisklowski.
An amendment offered by Mr. Visklowski.
Mr. Chairman, would ask that the amendment be considered as read.
Without objection.
The amendment, Mr. Chairman, adds report language clarifying congressional intent for 2 projects and reallocates funding between several more. It is a bipartisan amendment and would ask for its passage.
Those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment's adopted. Any further amendments? Mr. Kirk.
Chairman, I have an amendment.
Mr. Kirk will read.
An amendment offered by Mr. Kirk. On page 77, increase the...
Without objection.
Mr. Chairman, this amendment would seek to cut from the FY08 unobligated balances fund.
If the gentleman would yield, we would be happy to accept the amendment.
Thank you. I accept those. Thank you. I surrender the floor.
Those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment's adopted. Mr. Lake.
I thank the chairman, and first of all, I want to second the idea about the way the subcommittee works. I had the honor to serve on the Energy and Water Subcommittee for several years. I gave it up to serve on as ranking member of the all-powerful Ledge Branch Subcommittee with our chairman with the new do here today. I like that. Looks good. It looks good. That concludes my remarks, Mr. Chairman. But I was going to offer an amendment, $300 million for the flood control and coastal emergencies appropriation to address some of the problems that Mr. Hobson talked about. There is a great need out there for help with the non-federal levies. I think we reached the point where we really have to sit down and look at this whole problem that we have throughout the country. There's a lot of experts that think that much of the flooding problem in Iowa and other parts of the Midwest is traceable back to the levee system and its deficiencies. And we've got to get a lot more innovative into the system. And it's not just with the federally controlled levee system. I think we've got to figure out a constructive role for the Corps to deal with levee systems rather than just the federal role in the federal levies themselves. While the amendment added money to address a serious problem in many flooded states in the short term, I think it was also with the intention of bringing on the Corps' participation more active on a local level. The federal levees are the beginning of flood control structures in the river system, and local authorities, as we all know, have responsibility for thousands of levees throughout the country. We need to find some innovative ways to use federal money to help with the non-federal levees, not only to repair but also planning for the future, so we can prevent the kind of catastrophes that we've had recently in Iowa and throughout the Midwest. And I just asked to work with the chairman. Also mentioned Mr. Boswell this morning had contacted me about a real individual concern in Des Moines with one 50-year-old levee there. But I would ask the chairman and the ranking member to work with us. I know we don't know exactly what the need is going to be dollar-wise, and that's why with your commitment today, I'm going to not offer the amendment, but would ask for your help in the future. I yield back. I yield to the gentleman.
If I could be recognized to speak on the issue, I appreciate you raising the issue. The inclusion of non-federal levies for federal funding would be an authorizing issue, as the gentleman has acknowledged, the scope of which is unknown at this point in time. But certainly would want to work with yourself, Mr. Boswell, and everyone affected, as well as the chairman and ranking member of the authorizing committee, so that we can determine what the best thing to do is to provide relief. The fact is, and being from the state of Indiana myself, but all of us, seeing the devastation of the floods in the Midwest, know that things have to change. Is certainly one of the reasons why this committee provided $606 million in the supplemental measure, and again are trying to back and fill in the 09 measure. Simply also would want to congratulate the gentleman and thank him for his leadership. You have been a strong voice from the first moment of this disaster, and the fact is, as a former member of the subcommittee, prior to a disaster occurring, has been an advocate for doing the right thing and making an investment in infrastructure before the next disaster happens, and would want to publicly acknowledge that, and again, thank the gentleman for his service.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a couple comments. I, again, appreciate your bringing this forward. We've been talking about levees for a long time, and we still haven't gotten there. And this is not just a problem for the Midwest and where you see it now. We've got a huge problem in California. If that Sacramento River ever bursts those levees out there, it'll make Katrina look like child's play. This is a national problem. It needs to be addressed in a national way, and it needs rational, long-term thinking of how we're going to handle these problems, because they're going to happen again. And we've got to stop Band-Aid approaches to these things and get down to a real program. So you're timely. It's just not the right bill at the right time, but it's good to highlight this now, and I thank the chairman for his comments too. Now yield back.
If I may just mention, a lot of what happened in Iowa was that there's so many local city private levees out there. Some communities have done a great job, but all that does then is channel the water faster and higher to systems that aren't able to handle it, and that's the catastrophe we've seen. But I certainly appreciate the great work, the chairman on the supplemental, all the money that's in that, but remember, those are just for federal levies, and our big problem is in the whole system. Right, right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank the gentleman. The chair will declare a 10-minute recess. I would ask members to be back here as soon as they can. Did the gentleman?
I did not offer the amendment.